Imagine for a second that you are a licensed professional.
Hmm.
You spent years studying, passing these grueling exams, and you are bound by a very strict, very explicit code of ethics.
Right. A really high standard. Yeah.
Exactly. But you're also a citizen living in a democracy, and you're equipped with a microphone, a platform, and a whole lot of very strong opinions.
Which is a pretty volatile mix.
It really is. So what happens when your personal vitriol violently collides with your professional obligations on national radio? Where exactly does the citizen end and, the professional begin?
That's the core question, isn't it?
It is. But before we jump into the timeline of events, I need to make something crystal clear to you, our listener. Today's source material is a specific Philippine Supreme Court decision.
Right, and we need to be careful here.
Very careful. It involves highly charged, prominent political figures, specifically former President Benigno Simeon Noynoy, Aquino III, and attorney Lorenzo G. Gadon. We must explicitly state that this deep dive takes absolutely no political sides.
Zero. Not left-wing, not right-wing.
None at all. We are not endorsing any viewpoints, political affiliations, or ideologies mentioned in this case. Our mission today is strictly to unpack the factual and legal arguments, exactly as they are written in the original Supreme Court document. We're looking at this purely through the lens of legal ethics.
And we are dissecting a case that fundamentally asks where free speech ends and professional misconduct begins.
Right.
And honestly, more importantly, how the justice system responds when vulnerable, marginalized communities find themselves caught in the crossfire of a media broadcast.
Okay, let's unpack this. Take us back to the moment this all started, because the context of the broadcast is it's crucial to understanding the fallout.
Yeah, so it's June 24, 2021. News is just breaking across the Philippines that former President Aquino has passed away.
Huge news.
Massive. Media outlets are scrambling. It's a major historical moment, and newsrooms are rushing to confirm details, get the info out to the public, and, set the appropriate tone for a national broadcast regarding a former head of state.
Right.
So on that very day, amid all this developing chaos, attorney Lorenzo Gadon is appearing as a guest host on a DWIZ radio television show called Karambala.
Which, breaking news environments are inherently volatile anyway. The adrenaline is high, people are reacting in real time, and you generally rely on the hosts to anchor the situation.
Right, and the regular host of the show, Trixie Crisangelis, is actively trying to do exactly that. She is attempting to report this developing story respectfully.
Right, establishing that decorum.
Exactly. She announces that various sources are claiming the former president has died, and she even tries to call for a moment of silence on the air.
Oh, wow.
But as she is attempting to maintain this baseline of journalistic decorum, Gadon unleashes an absolute torrent of profanity.
And the Supreme Court document doesn't just paraphrase this. It transcribes this broadcast word for word to establish the exact nature of the conduct.
It leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. While the host is trying to clarify the news, Gadon is heard audibly rejoicing.
On the air.
Yes. He literally says, "Yehey, ha ha." He calls the former president an animal, saying, "Hayop na yan."
Wow.
He repeatedly uses severe expletives like putangina and tells the deceased former president to rest in hell.
That is just wow.
He also targets the former president's supporters, calling them Mga Bobong Dilawan, which translates to stupid yellow supporters.
Just from a purely human perspective, hearing someone rejoice and hurl profanities on national radio the moment a death is announced is incredibly jarring.
It's shocking.
But if it had stopped at personal insults, it might have just been a fleeting moment of, terrible taste.
Oh.
It escalated because he introduced a totally unverified medical claim into the public sphere.
Right. When Crisangelis mentions that a cause of death is coming in as cancer, Gadon immediately interjects.
He couldn't let it go.
No. He confidently claims that the former president actually had HIV, and that is why he didn't recover.
Based on what?
Well, when asked by the host if that was confirmed, Gadon claimed it was according to a friend who knew the Aquino family well.
So hearsay.
Entirely. It was a baseless, highly sensitive medical claim broadcast to a massive audience as if it were a verified fact.
The fallout from that must have been immediate.
It was. DWIZ management actually had to post a public apology on their Twitter page to the Aquino family for these uncalled-for comments on their network.
Which, if the network that gave you the microphone issues a public apology for your behavior, the logical next step for most professionals would be to walk it back, or at least stay quiet.
You'd think so.
But that's not what happens. 3 days later, on June 27, He is on a completely different broadcast.
Yeah, on DZRD's radio program, Eng Maestro, hosted by Herman Laurel and Anna Melendog Yui, he's given the floor to explain the controversial comments he made on Carambola.
Oh, this is his chance to apologize.
Right, but instead of apologizing, he doubles down completely.
Wait, how does someone possibly attempt to medically justify an HIV claim over the radio without any actual medical records or proof?
He admits on the air that the HIV claim was pure speculation. He says he based it entirely on the former president's physical appearance.
Just looking at him.
Yeah, describing him as butot balat, or skin and bones. Then he deploys this bizarre logical leap.
I'm bracing myself.
He argues that wealthy people don't die of diabetes because they can afford the best medical attention, technology, and medicine.
That's not how diabetes works.
Right. But, therefore, he speculated, it had to be a disease that the immune system couldn't fight off, concluding that it simply must be HIV.
It's like a doctor going on television to mock a celebrity's tragic medical diagnosis, but worse, because the diagnosis is entirely made up out of thin air.
Exactly.
It's based on a layman's physical observation and a complete misunderstanding of how chronic diseases actually work. So, DWIZ apologizes, but Gadon doesn't. He doubles down. Now, I know the Aquino family didn't file this complaint, so how does this escalate all the way to the Supreme Court? Someone had to formally pull the fire alarm.
What's fascinating here is the identity of the complainants. The complaint wasn't filed by anyone related to the former president.
Oh, really?
No, it was filed by Elena S. Felix and Jemme Cabreros. They are advocates, and crucially, they are persons living with HIV, or PLHIV.
Wow. Okay.
They filed this administrative complaint for disbarment, arguing that Gadon's statements weren't just about insulting a dead president. They were actively harming the PLHIV community by broadcasting fear, medical misinformation, and deep-seated stigma.
Which fundamentally shifts the narrative. This isn't a case of a personal grievance between political rivals anymore.
Not at all.
This is a case of alleged widespread public harm. When advocates file a disbarment complaint, they're asking the state to revoke his livelihood. If I'm trying to predict how a lawyer defends against this, I'm assuming he looks for a procedural out.
Yeah.
Does he claim these advocates don't have the legal standing to sue him because he wasn't talking about them directly?
That is exactly his first line of defense in his formal comment to the court. He argues he's dealing with the wrong party.
Classic legal maneuver.
Yeah. He says Felix and Cabreros have no cause of action, meaning no legal right to sue him, because his insults were aimed squarely at Aquino. He argues they weren't the direct victims of his words, so the case should be dismissed on a technicality.
Okay, so you can't sue me because I wasn't talking about you. But even if he won that procedural argument, he's still said those things on tape. He has to have a defense for the actual words, right?
Right.
Is he leading on free speech?
He leans heavily on free speech. He claims his statements were simply expressions of his personal opinion.
I see.
Since Aquino was a very prominent public figure, Gadon argues his comments are subject to public scrutiny. He asserts that, absent actual malice, his speech is fully protected by the Constitution.
And surely there's a defense about his role at that moment. Like, he wasn't in a courtroom representing a client.
Exactly. That brings us to his third argument, the private capacity defense. He insists that when he made these statements on the radio, he was acting in his private dealings as a citizen and a commentator.
Not as a lawyer.
Right, not in his professional capacity as a practicing lawyer.
Let's focus on that last one because that is highly relatable. I can hear someone out there listening to this and arguing, hey, there has to be a clock out time.
Yeah, a lot of people think that.
Like he's just a guy with a hot take on a radio show. Does the law genuinely demand that you act like a lawyer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Can't a professional take off the lawyer hat on the weekend?
The Supreme Court's rebuttal to that exact question is a resounding, uncompromising no.
Really?
Yes. But let's look at how they dismantled his defenses chronologically, starting with the wrong party argument. The court explains that disbarment proceedings are sui generis.
Sui generis. That's a Latin term meaning of its own kind or entirely unique to itself.
Right. Disbarment isn't like a standard civil lawsuit. If someone hits your car, you sue them for damages. You are the direct victim seeking compensation.
Makes sense.
But a disbarment proceeding is an investigation by the court into the conduct of its own officers. The primary objective isn't to punish the lawyer or compensate a specific victim.
Then what is it?
The objective is to protect the public and the administration of justice. The court is asking, is this person still fit to hold the privilege of being a lawyer? Because the focus is on the integrity of the profession itself, anyone can file an administrative complaint to bring misconduct to the court's attention.
Oh, wow. That requires a major shift in how we think about professional licenses. A law license isn't just a certificate of graduation. It is essentially a monopoly on access to the justice system granted by the state.
Exactly.
Only lawyers can file certain motions, represent clients in court, or offer binding legal counsel. Therefore, policing that monopoly isn't about resolving petty interpersonal disputes. It's about maintaining the integrity of the entire judicial system.
Precisely.
The court is essentially saying, we don't care who brought this to our attention. Now that we see an officer of the court acting this way, we are obligated to deal with it.
So how do they address that off-the-clock defense? The idea that he was just a private citizen on the radio. The court firmly shuts this down by citing historical precedent, specifically cases like Velin v. Ruiz and Belohinars v. Guevara.
Okay.
These cases establish that a lawyer cannot divide their personality. You do not get to be a paragon of justice at one time and a reckless citizen at another when it comes to moral character.
You're a lawyer 24/7.
Right. If your conduct in your private life shows a lack of good moral character or a lack of probity, it proves you are unfit for the profession as a whole. Good character isn't a uniform you wear to the office. It's a fundamental prerequisite for holding the license.
And beyond the philosophical argument, there's a glaring factual flaw in his defense. He wasn't just a random caller on these radio shows.
He was literally introduced on the air as an attorney.
Exactly.
He was actively giving legal opinions on various matters being discussed during those broadcasts. He was trading on the authority of his title to legitimize his presence and his statements.
You can't use the prestige of the title to get the microphone and then suddenly claim you aren't a lawyer when you get called out for what you say into it.
You really can't have it both ways.
Which brings us to the profound ethical failure at the core of this decision. The prompt for our deep dive today specifically asked us to focus on the ethical points, and the Supreme Court leans heavily into this, specifically citing the newly revised Code of Professional Responsibility and Accountability, or the CPRA.
The application of the CPRA here is critical. They specifically look at Canon II, which governs propriety. This is where we see exactly what the legal profession demands of its members in the modern digital age.
It sounds like the court realized the old rules were written for a time when misconduct mostly happened in a physical courtroom or a private law office. They needed a 21st century update for the era of viral radio clips, podcasts, and social media platforms.
That is exactly why the code was updated. Canon II explicitly demands that lawyers create a safe environment.
Meaning?
It prohibits lawyers from creating or promoting an unsafe or hostile environment, whether in private or public, online or offline. It specifically mandates the use of dignified, culturally sensitive language on all mass media and social media. The Supreme Court recognized that the digital footprint of an attorney is now just as impactful as their conduct before a judge.
And this is where the mechanics of the law meet the real-world impact on marginalized communities. The court didn't just penalize Gadon for insulting a public figure. They penalized him for weaponizing a highly sensitive, deeply stigmatized medical condition.
Yes.
By confidently claiming on the radio that HIV is untreatable even with immense wealth and the best medical technology, he was broadcasting dangerous medical misinformation to the masses.
And the complainants, Felix and Cabreros, pointed out that his statements did profound damage to public health efforts. Misinformation like that sows fear, discourages people from getting tested or seeking treatment, and exacerbates the already rampant social stigma against the PLHIV community.
Right.
The struggle against HIV isn't just medical, it's deeply sociological.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why does the Supreme Court view this specific act of misinformation as grounds for disbarment? It comes down to the weight that the word attorney carries in society. When an anonymous troll on the internet spreads medical disinformation or mocks a marginalized group, most people have the media literacy to ignore it. But when a person carrying the prestigious title of attorney, an officer of the court, a sworn arbiter of truth and law, spreads that same disinformation on a national broadcast, a significant segment of the public will believe it simply because of the authority of the title.
The Supreme Court recognized that exact dynamic. They noted that his act of spreading misinformation, giving the false impression that HIV is a guaranteed death sentence regardless of resources, was irresponsible in the extreme.
But it was his response to the advocates that sealed it, wasn't it?
Yes. On that June 27 broadcast, instead of reflecting on the harm he caused, he mocked them.
Unbelievable.
He said if they wanted to sue him, they'd have to resurrect Aquino from the ashes. He then challenged the PLHIV community directly, suggesting they were cowardly hiding their status, and dared them to come out in the open and admit they have HIV just to sue him.
That is awful.
The court called this act of heckling and threatening vulnerable people the final nail to seal his fate.
Because he wasn't just failing to act with dignity. He was actively using his platform, his title, and his unchecked aggression to inflict psychological harm on an already marginalized sector.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this penalty phase. The court decides to impose the ultimate penalty, disbarment. But this can't be his first offense if the court is going straight to the nuclear option, right? A single bad radio interview, even a terrible one, usually results in a suspension first.
You're right, it wasn't his first offense. The court establishes a very clear, documented pattern of behavior. In a previous case called Mendoza v. Gadon, he was suspended from the practice of law for 3 months for using abusive and intemperate language against a fellow lawyer.
So he had been warned.
Crucially, in that decision, he was explicitly warned that repeating this kind of behavior would result in a much more severe penalty. Furthermore, the court noted he had multiple other pending administrative cases against him for similar misconduct.
So the court is looking at an officer who has been formally warned, who has been disciplined with a suspension, and who simply refuses to alter his conduct. They determine that his actions in this radio broadcast finally warrant being permanently stripped of his license.
Yes, but...
Here is the massive procedural twist in this document.
Right. The court meticulously outlines his guilt, declares his actions warrant disbarment, and then acknowledges that they cannot actually disbar him.
Because he had already been disbarred in a completely separate previous case.
Yes.
Wait, how do you fire someone who has already been fired? You can't revoke a license that no longer exists.
I know, it sounds like a paradox.
He was previously disbarred in a highly publicized case involving a viral video where he hurled profanities at a journalist named Reyes Robles. If he's already lost his license from that incident, what is the legal point of this new ruling? Does the Supreme Court even have the jurisdiction to punish someone who is technically no longer a lawyer?
This is a complex area of administrative law governed by Section 42, Canon the 6th of the new CPRA. The court acknowledges the physical impossibility of disbarring someone twice.
Right.
However, the court maintains exclusive jurisdiction over offenses that a person committed while they were still a member of the legal profession. Because Gadon was still an active lawyer when he made these radio broadcasts in June 2021, the court retains the full authority to discipline him for those specific acts, regardless of his current status.
So they had the jurisdiction, but they lacked the primary weapon of disbarment. How do they actually penalize him?
They use a two-pronged approach. First, there is an immediate financial penalty. They imposed a fine of PHP $150,000.
Okay.
Second, and structurally much more important for the long term, they ordered that this new penalty of disbarment, even though it cannot be physically executed, be permanently recorded in his personal file with the Office of the Bar Confidant.
To put that in perspective, it's essentially putting a permanent padlock on his file. He might try to ask for the keys in 5 or 10 years, claiming he's a changed man. But this ruling guarantees the Bar Confidant will see exactly why he was locked out in the first place. Why is that file so critical if he's already out of the profession?
Because of the concept of judicial clemency. In the legal system, disbarment isn't always permanent in practice.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes disbarred lawyers can petition the Supreme Court years later, demonstrating profound remorse, rehabilitation, and a return to good moral character, and ask for their license back. It's rare, but it happens.
So this blocks that.
By permanently recording this second disbarment-level offense in his file, the court is building an almost insurmountable fortress against his return. If he ever applies for clemency, this explicit record of weaponizing medical misinformation and intentionally harming marginalized communities will be waiting right there in his file to block his path. It raises the standard for proving rehabilitation to a near impossible height.
It's the court ensuring that the integrity of the profession is protected not just today, but decades into the future.
Exactly.
We've gone on quite a journey today. We started with a shocking, chaotic moment on a breaking news radio broadcast full of expletives and wild, unverified medical speculation.
A total mess.
And we watched how the Supreme Court meticulously transformed that chaotic moment into a profound ruling on professional ethics and public harm. We learn that a law license, or any professional license, isn't a coat you can just take off and hang by the door when you want to vent on the radio.
Yeah.
It is a continuous identity that carries immense ethical weight, 24 hours a day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it tells us something vital about the digital age we live in. In the era of constant broadcasting, instant communication, and the merging of professional and personal personas on social media, an expert's ethical obligations are always on the record.
Always.
The court is making it unequivocally clear that words have a devastating ripple effect, especially when they target vulnerable communities regarding public health. And they will hold their officers accountable for the ripples they create, regardless of whether they were standing in a courtroom or sitting in a radio booth.
And that leaves us with a critical thought to take away. The Supreme Court stepped in here to protect the public from a professional's harmful speech because they had the jurisdiction to do so. But we live in a world where the lines between professional advice, entertainment, and influencer culture are blurring faster than ever before.
Oh, absolutely.
We see licensed professionals building massive followings on TikTok, YouTube, and podcasts, often venturing far outside their specific areas of expertise to give hot takes on culture, politics, and medicine. So how should society or professional medical and legal boards police the digital footprints of doctors, lawyers, and experts when they step outside their lane and become media personalities?
It's a huge question for the future.
The next time you hear a titled professional, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer giving a hot take on a podcast or a morning radio show, ask yourself, are you truly listening to their specific expertise, or are they just banking on the unearned authority of their title to make you believe them? Until next time, keep unpacking the world around you.